Hey guys, this is Neil, the art instructor at masterpaintingnow.com. Sorry I've been away a while. I've been really busy with moving into a new house. Right now I'm actually staying in a hotel for a little bit until it's ready. But anyway, nonetheless, thought I'd go ahead and do a tutorial here and answer someone's question at the same time. So the person's having a hard time figuring out how is it you go about drawing the face when you want to draw it in lines. Well, what I recommend doing, and this is actually why I recommend doing it, is doing a lot of tracing of photos. So when you trace a photo, what it's going to help you see is where hard and soft lines form. Now, one thing you should do, if you haven't already, is watch my video. So just do a search for on hard and soft lines. Just go to my channel. You know how you can search that person's channel for different videos. And search my channel for the video called Hard and Soft Edges. And I show what the difference is. So right here is an edge in reality. There is really no like hard edges in reality. Well, not when it comes to like form. There is like a hard edge in the sense of you have a box. You know, a box has a hard edge. You know, a computer can have a hard edge and things like this. But other than that, there's not like hard edges. So what is this right here? Why is this considered a hard edge? And over here, it's considered a soft edge. It has to do with gradients and how close the gradients are together. So the only difference is then between a hard and soft edge is how quick the transition happens between the dark and the light. So if you have like a soft brush, for example, and you have it like this, let's go ahead and make sure I have this on 100% opacity. Yeah, black. Okay, should have came out darker than that, I would think. I'll just go a couple times. I don't know why it's coming out so not dark. Let me pause this and figure out what's going on. I guess it's just the sensitivity of the thing. So if you have a hard edge here like that, right? Let's go make it super dark. And then you put like a softer color right next to it. Even though I'm using the exact same brush, you'll notice that there's more of a gradient between there. It's not such a hard line. If I take the same brush though, make it smaller, it's still a soft brush, and I make a line here and a line here, you'll note that it looks like a hard edge, right? So the hard edge comes from how fast the transition happens between tones or colors or however you want to look at it. Right, so when you're doing a contour drawing of something, you're trying to find the lines. How do you find the lines? Now, a lot of the things, it's really easy to see the lines because there's a what we consider in painting hard edges here, and like the nostrils, the edge of the lips. All this is really easy to see where the lines will be, so you know exactly where to trace because the hard edges are apparent. So I have a hard edge here and here. We have hard edge here, hard edge here. You can see the hard edges are apparent. But what happens when the hard edges aren't as apparent? How is it that you find them? And that's what this video is going to be about. So when we come to the nose here, how do we find the other hard edges? How do we go about finding, where do we make it? Do we draw the nose like this here, and it comes down? And then are these the flanges? It also helps knowing the mechanics of what you're drawing. So we know the face, the mechanics, it comes up, and it rounds a little bit, and it comes down like a bicycle ramp, like this, right? So we know that's the shape of the bridge of the nose as it goes all the way up. When it gets thinner, and then finally you have this diamond shape here, not diamond shape, excuse me, the same kind of bicycle ramp shape, but it's like this. You have this kind of shape like this, right? Kind of a triangle with the tip cut off, pyramid kind of shape. And then you have the lines coming this way. So it's knowing the form of the face, the grid of the face. And remember, once you get to here, you have another lines here like this, because this part is another like almost like a cylinder, tube kind of thing that comes out, like this whole part here of the lid. It's like a tube partly coming out of the face. Knowing this is going to help you figure out where you ought to trace lines. So when you're tracing a photo to capture the likeness, there's a couple of different things. You have different choices for the nose. You can either come on this very outer edge here with a light line, right, and then come again here, but that's not going to look attractive. You might do that for like an older man or something like that, or something you're trying to make look less feminine. For the female, you probably want to come out here, knowing that this is about where the nose is. Now, how do you know those lines are there? They're not even visible in the photo. There's nothing there to indicate that. It's knowing the shape of the nose. It's knowing that the nose is pretty flat from here to here, right? And then it starts kind of bubbling up here. So from the side view, you have, kind the nose comes out like this. It's knowing this general shape of the nose. It's knowing the anatomy of the nose that you have right in here. There's a flat part. It's kind of more flat, and then it starts rounding out and going around to the other side. If you know that about the nose, then that's how you figure out the shape. That's how you figure out how to trace. It's also how you figure out how to draw if you're not tracing, but tracing will help you learn how to find the hard edges. So there's no hard edges here. You're inventing them. So you come down here and you invent this hard edge here. Bam. There's a hard edge here. I'm inventing this. So you know the anatomy, so you know what it is you want to emphasize in the photo. So believe it or not, tracing photos is an art of itself. It takes understanding of form and stuff to do a good tracing of a photo. Again, I'm going to go right here. Now, if you want to, and this is just one way you could do this, right? We'll just use only contours. We're just using line. We're going to use nothing else but line. I know the natural form of the nose that has a bottom here, so I'm going to show that by drawing the line there, even though it's not visible in the photo. You can also, draw her lines there if you want to, but I'm not going to do that because it usually makes it look less attractive. And so here you have a nose that looks quite large. And this is usually what happens. Notice her nose doesn't look that big in the photo because it's all nice soft edges, it's not like contour lines. What I usually always do when I draw a nose, after I have drawn it, I take the whole nose. And this is what I do this for almost every single client I do this. In fact, most people always think their nose looks big when turned into a cartoon, so I always reduce it smaller. But still, that's not the most attractive nose, right? So how do we get an attractive nose here? That's the whole point. You want to capture the likeness of the nose, but you also want to make it look attractive, right? Because her nose isn't unattractive. And if you're trying to do it with just line, it gets a little bit tricky. So I'm going to use a smaller brush here. Let's go ahead and make these a lot smaller and go with the anatomy more, what you understand about the anatomy. Maybe light lines here to show the underside. The important part here is you want more slits than you do anything else to keep the nose looking not like Miss Piggy. And it's really easy to get that, look, that Miss Piggy look, if you're not careful. I might only do a few lines here just to show, breaking of shape and form. Might do a few here just to show that breaking of that form, to show there's a point of the nose here, like a round ball here. And I'm also going to just come here maybe, and maybe just come right here like so. Now from here, I might actually make my line a lot smoother, or excuse me, a lot thinner before I come out. And that might be how I decide to draw the nose. But still, the nose looks large. Now, this here, the reason why this happens, notice, this is why tracing is so important, because what will happen is if you're not tracing it, and you're actually drawing it from just looking at the photo, and then you look at it, you're like, why is my nose not looking like her nose? Look at her nose looks like this. Why does my nose look like that? Well, it's traced. So what happens here is when you reduce something to just line, things look a lot bigger than they actually are. And that's why I always take, once I get a good likeness representation of the nose where I want the lines to be, I always reduce the size of the nose, like this. And you can also it'll look a lot better if you were just to add a few, like shadow, almost like shadow lines. Make some of it where it's, disappeared, not really there. So, let a lot of it be negative space to reveal the form itself as well. And I might even, leave off this line right here altogether. Maybe just have one line of the nose, and it's going to look better when it's all done and traced. Right, so that's very important to understand how to do to understand the form of the face and the form of anything. You have to know the form of it, the mesh, like the mesh form of it. Like, you have to be able to visualize the mesh going over the face and over any object you're drawing in order to figure out how you're going to add the contour lines and where to add them. Now, of course, you could just as well go, well, I don't know anything about the form. I want to capture the likeness of the face, but because I don't know anything about form, you can also just go over here to the screen real quick, click yes. I don't know why I keep asking me that again. I can't tell not to. Anyway, bring my mouse back over here. Another thing you can do is just go through and get all the shadows, right? So you can go, okay, well, that's the eraser. I don't know anything about forms, so all I'm going to do is basically copy what I see when it comes to the shadows and only the shadows. That's the only part I'm going to copy. And so let's say I was just doing this on another piece of paper, not tracing, but tracing will help you get a feel for this as well. You can learn a lot from tracing, and that's why I recommend when you first start doing the whether it's a form drawing like this, form drawing meaning you're using mostly the darker parts, you're using shadow to figure out how everything should look rather than contour. What tracing is going to help you do is learn that, hey, things look a lot different when they don't have shadow on them. So the nose will look a lot bigger and things like that. That's what's going to help you learn. Just doing this very quickly, giving you an idea of what I'm talking about. You can see the lightness of something, of a face, starts to show through. And if you just do all the darker shadows like that and medium shadows, you're going to get something that looks very much like the face that you're looking at in the photo. So that's another way to do it. So, you don't have to necessarily do contour lines. Now, if it is that you want to do the contour lines, again, I'm going to make it, don't show this again. That's starting to irritate me. Okay, so if you're doing contour lines, you have to decide, you could like, okay, well, this is where I'm seeing the edge at, because of where it's going, but the nose is going to look funny this way, right? That's not going to look right at all. And so instead, I like to always do usually just one line anyway with the cartoon. So I'm going to come over here somewhere there. It's knowing the contours of the face. It's knowing the mesh of the face. If you know the mesh of the face, this is more flat, then it'll help you see this better. Right now, there were some questions that was asked of me, and I'm going to go ahead and answer those as well for this photo from the last video I did of this. I think it was the other VIP video. Anyway, so what happens is they said, how come you have this light color here? You can see the shade of color there is lighter than around it. How does that happen? What happens here? Well, we have two light sources, right? This light source on the right-hand side, our right-hand side, her left, is brighter than the one on this side. That's typical of photography. It's a typical photographer setup. This is why you have the competing light sources. When you have two competing light sources, normally if it was just this light on this side, all this side of the nose would be in dark shadow, and this side of the nose would be all bright. But when you have two competing light sources, boom, they light up both sides here, and so you get these middle tones throughout the body. And so if you were working with an arm, for an example, let's say here's the deltoid, then you have the bicep, and then you have tricep back there, and so forth. Brachialis come through elbow. Anyway, so you have the arm like this. If you have two competing light sources, the shadow is going to run across the middle of the forms. And the light is going to, you're going to have two light sources on each side. And this gives a kind of metallic look, and comic books use it a lot. So that's what's happening in this photo here. Now, because each light is not just on the left and right hand side of the object, in other words, let's say this is the object. Why did it not draw? Oh, eraser, that's why. Let's say this is the object, and you have a light on this side and a light on this side. If it was just on the right and left hand side, then only the right and the left hand side of the object would be lit up. But if these lights are rolling around to be in front of the object, right? In other words, let's say we, the viewer, are the light source, and this is what we're looking at, then this is the bright spot. Everything else is going to fade away and get dark outside of that, right? So if the light is also toward us, it's not just on the side. If it's just on the side, then the highlights are going to be there and there because the light sources are on the left and right hand side. But if the lights start coming around and in front of the object that is toward us, the viewer, now the highlights get here and here. And so you have this middle shadow, right? And this is what we're dealing with. So what's important to understand then with this photo when that happens is a lot of the flat objects, when a light is facing more in the front of the object, Then flat planes, which here in this particular case is kind of a flat plane. It has a little dip right here, and that's why that's a little bit shaded because it's kind of moving away from the light. Basically, you're imagining as if you, the viewer, are the light source. And when you, the viewer, are the light source, things that dip away from you, this is dipping away from you, gets darker. Things that pop out toward you, like this here, get brighter. So that's how we can see the shape here now. Just by the shadows, we can see the shape here. It kind of comes up like this and down like this. We know it has this kind of form to it, right? And you know that it has this form to it because of the lighting. So we know that the lighting then is more on the right-hand side, this darker light. And this shadow is not as dark as it usually would be because of this light over here is lighting up that shadow. It's making the shadow appear to be lighter. But you can see there's a form here. Your typical brow form. It's not as big as like Frankenstein, but it's there. You can see that is there, and that's like the mesh you would imagine. But between these two shapes, there's kind of a flat shape here. And that flat shape that we're seeing as these dip into it is receiving light as a flat plane would. And how do flat planes receive light? If you watch my form lighting and perspective course, then you know flat planes, when a light is facing a plane, let's say this is the plane, right? And when a light hit is perpendicular to it, or is that right? Perpendicular. So this is the wall, and the light is coming this way, right? Yeah, because it's not parallel, so you're perpendicular. So when it makes like a T like that, the direction of the light hits this object, then this object doesn't be lit up evenly if it's a flat plane. If it's a curved plane, and the light comes, it's hitting here, and it's hitting each edge, the light's traveling farther away, and therefore, as it turns away from the light, it gets darker and darker. So how would I draw this curved edge here if it was facing in front of me? The center of it would be bright, and it would get darker as it moved away from the light. And that center would be the brightest, right? That's how that is. But this is a flat plane, so it's all going to be evenly lit up. Hopefully this is making sense. I go through this in my form course anyway. It's just sometimes the information leaves the brain and you have to kind of see it again or hear it again. So imagine you have a flat plane here. Sometimes it's a slightly dipped plane. You have two slightly bulging planes here. Two softballs and a flat plane. So what would happen then if the light were directly in the center? That is, we, the viewer, were the light source for this here. This would be lit up evenly. And here we would have, this would be turning away from the light. Back over here, all the edges of these kind of egg shapes would be turning away from the light. And then the brightness would be hitting the center, and it would kind of fade out as it goes out. But this flat plane is lit evenly. That's what would happen. Two softballs and a flat plane. And then of course they would cast little cast shadows. Alright, so I know this is sloppy, but it's just to teach a point. So there's no reason to belabor and make the video longer than it needs to be. Now the other thing then is what happens when we're dealing with the light that's in this photo. So you have this shape here, and again right now we're talking about two kind of softball shapes and a flat shape in between them, right? Now we're going to take this light color. So now we, the viewer, aren't the light source. Now the light source is a little bit to the right and a little bit to the left for each one. So this light source, the one on the right, the dominant light source, the brighter light source, is hitting mainly this part of this kind of egg shape. That's the brightest part right there. And then it's going to fade out as it goes out around, like so. This side over here isn't going to be hit by the light so much because it's farther away, but it's going to at least lighten up the shadow side. This side over here, the light is not as bright, but it does the same thing, and it fades out as it goes around. This middle, though, again, is still being lit evenly by both light sources because both light sources are also facing us, the viewer. That is, not directly to the left and right hand side of the object. Now what would happen if the light were directly on the left and right hand side of the objects? Well, then just the edges would be hit with bright light like this. This edge over here would be hit with light. Let's go ahead and go like that, that. And that middle part wouldn't be hit with light at all because the light can't see it. These mounds are blocking this flat plane. And that's pretty much all that that's all that we'd have light on. Everything else would be in shadow. Right, okay. The same principle is understood here with the cheeks. So understand you have this plane that comes down here like this, and it's kind of like a flat plane that kind of comes up like this. Then you have a kind of curved plane here, right? And that in itself creates that kind of bicycle ramp thing here. Ramps that kind of go like this, like on the old video game Excite Bike. They kind of create that shape like that. Then you have more of a mound here, right? More like of a roundness here. And you have these flanges coming out. For now, we'll think about this as one big triangle piece as it has a bottom shape down here. Think about the form of the face. So how does the cheeks look? The cheeks then have a form too. If you just deal with this part of the cheek, they come up right here. It's more flat right there. But right here, there's a upward pattern like this. And then it kind of rounds off and gets more flat like this. So if you were to draw this then, imagine basically first, let's think about it in the most simple way possible. Imagine we have two softballs here, like so. Bam, two softballs, and then we have an egg in the middle, right? Imagine it this way first. This will help you understand the point. Two softballs and an egg. Imagine the light source is directly at us. We are the light source. The camera is the light source. So the middle of the egg will hit the bright light will be here, and it's going to fade out as it goes away. I almost wonder if I should use a soft brush for this. And then same thing here. This is the part that's facing us the most. That part is facing us less and less and less. Same thing here. This part's facing us the most, less, less, and less. So it turns around, and that's how you see the form. That's how we're able to see that this thing is having a form like this. This is an egg. It's coming out at us. The peak is here. That's the part that's closest to us. This is the part that's closest to us on the softballs. The softballs, again, if you imagine the form of them, it's like a bunch of, like this, right? That's making the form, like a bunch of three-dimensional rings. So you're imagining it like that. You can imagine the grid, you know, if it was a three-dimensional program. So if you think about it that way, this will make drawing so much easier. It really will. So how is it you figure out then? Why is it that you have these dark areas here when you have the light sources? Well, remember, well, before I get into that, let's do this one more thing. Let's redo that what we just did, but this time we are going to do it with two light sources. So you have the two softballs here, softball-like shapes, and then you have the egg-like shape, right? Let's light them up now as if you had a left and right light source. So when you have a left and right light source, the part that, and it's not just left and right, but rather it's left and right light source, but also coming toward us, the viewer. So it's almost hitting direct on. Let me go ahead and draw what that means. So let's say we have a top-down view of our object here. This is the person, and red or yellow will be the lights. The lights aren't on the left and right of her. This is a top-down view. The lights are here and here, right? So they're not directly in front of her. We the camera, are directly in front of her. That's how we first shaded it. We first shaded it as if we, the camera, was the light source. An example of that would be when you're using one of those handheld cameras and you turn the light on the camera on. And that's how you get that kind of boring, flat shading to everything. So the lights are hitting her here and here like this. Another view then, from the top, let's say a front view, here's her face, here's her eyes, here's her face, right? Yay, she's happy. The lights are also a little bit above her like this. Okay. Now that we know what the light source is, let's go ahead and do it. Again, I recommend, if you want more detail of this and understand it better, take my Form Lighting Dynamics course, or better yet, might as well just get all my courses for only an extra like $8, whatever it is. So you get 60 hours for 29 bucks. Anyway, I'm not trying to sell anything, just let you know. What's going to happen then is this is the part of the sphere, right? Imagine this whole sphere is coming. What part of the sphere is closest to the light? Well, we know the part that's closest to us is right here. But now the part that's closest to the light is over here, right? Because you have that, you remember you have a mesh going all the way around. And so it's going to fade away as it gets further from the light, like so. And it's going to keep fading like that. So the darkest part is at the edge there. The same thing with the nose. It's a longer object, and so the light hits more of it. And it keeps going like that until it fades away. Now over here, the light from the right-hand side barely even hits this side, right? Basically all it does is it lightens up the shadow on that side. The light on this side, which isn't nearly as bright, trying to pick a lighter color, it lightens up these shadows a little bit. Lightens up these shadows a little bit. Now here, it hits here, then it comes out, and it comes out, and it comes out, comes out like that. And so what you're left here, and this shadow actually be a little bit darker, you're left with the shadow here, a little bit of shadow here, a little bit of shadow here. That's what you're left with, and you're left with a little bit of shadow on that side, but not much, right? Understanding that that's what happens with these basic shapes is you have to keep those basic shapes in mind when you're drawing a face and go, okay, so I know the mesh, I know the three-dimensionality of the face here. It comes up and out, up and out, up and out. I'm keeping that basic simple idea. I have little balls right here, and I'm kind of imagining them being shaded, but they're more flat balls. They're not like, they're balls embedded into the object. So if you take a three-dimensional object, here's a circle. If you have a ball just sitting right on top of it, that's not the cheek. The cheek is more like the ball is embedded inside and only a part of the ball is sticking out. Right there like that. That's the cheek that we're talking about right here. So there is a mesh that we can talk about here that kind of comes and it spirals out, let's say. It's kind of protruding out toward us a little bit. It's like a bump. And so knowing that, then you have this dip, and you have this dip and hill like this. And it comes out this way as well. When you see that form now, when you can see the gradient of the form, now you know the nose is blocking this powerful light from hitting here, right? So since it can't light up this shadow appears dark. This side of the face, right, this is all being hit, because remember this is a form. So the light is hitting here, and it's radiating out, but it disappears here because this is the other side of the hill, and so the light isn't going over there. And so that's why you have the light hitting here on this part of the face. And this is all kind of a flat plane. There's a little dip in here, but not much. And so all this is receiving light, and then here you have a dip away from the light. It's turning away from the light. Again, the nose is sticking out. It's coming out toward us. And so this light over here can't go past that and reach over here, and so this is dark. The light can hit right here, that is this light source is bright, and so it's not going to have, this light's lighter so that the shadow is dark over here. This light's brighter, so the shadow here is lighter. This light can't reach here either, only from underneath the nose maybe, if the light were low enough. So why is it that this one's dark and this one's light if the nose is blocking both light sources? The answer is this light source is so bright. Look, you can tell how bright this light source is. Look at the areas it's hitting. Right, it's a much brighter light source on the left side, and that's typical of photography. This most likely isn't even a light source. This most likely is a reflective surface. That is, most likely using a big bright lamp, like this, that has some bright ass lights in it. And then over here, they're using a whiteboard. And so the light is reflecting off this whiteboard a little bit and softening up some of the shadows on the side of the face. So it's kind of acting like a second light source. If that's not what they're doing, they're using a bright light and a less bright light. That simple. So the bright light here, it's also turning over this edge more. It's also bouncing off this nose more. And because it's bouncing off this nose and down here, like this, right, it's lightening up. Bounce light is lighting up that shadow more. This is a lot to take in. It's a lot of information to have in your brain when you're drawing from imagination. but it's the kind of stuff you need to have in your main or in your brain to draw from the imagination if you want to draw realistically. But you can simplify it a lot, and there's certain things you can just kind of memorize, like, hey, when I'm using two light sources like this side's lighter, this side's darker. It's a very simple thing to memorize and put in your brain and just know that's there. But understanding why is also important. Now the nose, what happens with the nose? Well, this side of the nose, remember the nose is a shape kind of like a ramp like this. Well, this side of the ramp then is being hit by the light, the really bright light, so it's really bright. This side of the nose is being hit, or this side of the ramp is being hit by a less bright light, so it's not as bright as this. The middle of the nose here, which kind of rolls over, would normally is being hit by light, and actually if it were only this big bright light source, because the light is kind of coming toward us, this would be a lot lighter in color. In fact, let me show you kind of what it would look like. If it weren't for this competing light source on the left-hand side, what we'd probably see is something more like this, as far as this middle goes, like that. And the shadow would actually be over on this side over here. Be more like that. Boom, that's how the nose would most likely look. And so what happens is this does start rolling away, and so it does start getting shadow, but when two lights compete together, it's almost like they push the shadow into the center to get dark. Same thing happens with a sphere. If you take a sphere, like this, take a sphere, and you have two competing light sources heating the sphere, what ends up happening, you have this brighter light source here, and it's like, bam, it's hitting here, and the other light source, it's not as bright, and it's hitting this side, right, and it's coming out like this. What ends up happening is it pushes all the shadow here to this center part, and it becomes really dark. And you would think it should be really light, and sometimes it can get lit up, it can become lighter just depending on how close these two light sources become. In other words, let's look at a top view again of the scene. When you have this top view of the scene over here, this is our object, and yellow will draw the light sources. When the light sources are more far away like this, you get this nice middle light here. But you move these two light sources closer together, they're acting more like one light, and then that middle light disappears. And now what we end up seeing is something more like so. Boom, boom, two light sources like that. And then they're going to fade and come out like that. Anyway, you can test this out yourself with some kind of ball or something and two different light sources in the bathroom where it's nice and dark. And so you only have those two little light sources. Hopefully this helps you start to figure out not only how form works more, how to see form better on the face, but also once you're able to see the form on the face, how to know where to draw lines at. In the hair, there's a lot of change in form, so you have like a lot of dark here met by a light right next to it, and that kind of shows you what we call a line, even though it's not really a line. Now on fingers, something similar happens. How would I go about drawing line work for this finger here, for example? Well, we already know the edge of the line as it rolls away from everything. That is the edge of the object that has background behind it. That's the edge that we see of the object. We also see the edge of this object over here. But there's this inside, and I might use thinner lines and show the form with line like that to separate the top and bottom. And if I'm doing it from imagination, actually it just happens to be this lighting is working good. I want to kind of separate the top form of the finger from the side. So let's say I'm drawing a finger over here. Let's go ahead and kind of sketch this out first. Get rid of her face. And I have a finger kind of coming like this. And it's going to kind of come down here. All right, so let's say I have a finger and it's kind of like this, right? This is just part of a finger that I'm seeing. And what happens is, say I have a part of the top edge of the finger is being viewed, and a little bit of the side edge of the finger is being viewed. How I'm going to go about drawing that, if with just line, if I wanted to show three-dimensionality to it, is I would go, okay, so let's go and take the outline of my object I'm drawing, And I can draw, oops. Actually, I do want to add a little bit of skin here. And I can come like this, and then I'm going to use a smaller. Now, this point here, what I'm trying to do is separate the side plane and the top plane of my finger. And that's all I'm doing with this line work here. Then I might, if I'm using any sort of shadowing at all, shed, let's say, the side plane, not the top plane. But if I'm just doing lines, nothing but lines, you can see part of the nail as it wraps around and goes to the other side over there. I'd probably draw a little differently, but anyway. Just a quick idea, quick demonstration of what I'm talking about. You can kind of tell that has form. There's form there. And you can do the same thing with like a box, right? Let's say you want to kind of make something look like a box. Is you have first the main shape of the box. And then obviously you need that middle line, right, to show a change in form. So I'm showing one side and one side of the box. Two different sides of the box is what gives that idea of three-dimensionality. If I were just to completely erase that line, especially these lines, now I don't have something that looks so three-dimensional. Looks like a flat shape to me. But if I take and I show the edge, if I show an edge in there, hint at an edge, suddenly it starts to look three-dimensional because I'm hinting at edges here. And that's what gives the idea of three-dimensionality. So you do the same thing with objects, with like fingers and something that might not look like it has edges. It has an edge. A face still has an edge. The human head, it has an edge to it. And you have to think about the edge. So if you have a head and you're drawing it, let's say, in kind of like a 3/4 view here, there's still an edge of the head. What I'm going to show you is where the edge of that head is. So the edge of the head then, in the 3/4 view, is you have an edge right here. Bam, it comes down like this. This is the edge of the head. The other edge is out here, and we're actually seeing it. Right, so there's this, bam. It comes down like this. Right? So we're seeing the edge there. And just by doing that, notice how I made it look three-dimensional just because I found the edge line of the face there. The other edge is on this side over here. That's turning and rolling away from us. That's how you find. There's also another edge here I can find, right in here where it shows it starts coming into the top plane of the head. And this right here is all the top plane of the head. And by drawing that little line there, it shows you and it starts to reveal that there's edges to the face. There's more edges you can figure out. There's edges to the nose and so forth. And it's how things turn over. You have to imagine a three-dimensional shape, and then if it turns, you can start to see the edges. When you're viewing a face from straight on, there are edges. This is almost straight on. You can still see the edges of the face. You have it here as it comes back. Here as it comes back. Imagine you have the two. Like here was that middle, if we simplify it, you have the middle holes here. Right? That's going inwards. Imagine that Pac-Man inwards, it's going in. The other edge is right here on the cheekbone. Right along here. That's the edge as it comes down to the lips. That edge continues down pretty much like almost like a straight line if you want to simplify it like this. Right? There's another edge here if you want to imagine it coming out like this little box. And then the other edges are right here as it comes down to a point. And so you're imagining these edges. The nose, you have the more simplified, you have the edges like this, another edge here, like that. And that's acting kind of like a ramp. Then you have a more of a sphere, and then kind of like half spheres, or however you want to understand those edges. Start getting more into the eye, you can understand you have an indent here, like an indent here, almost like holes in the head first. You imagine it like holes in the head, and then you build on top of that. There's more edges still to just be seen. This is like you're still kind of seeing side planes here. This is turning away from us, and it's going to a side plane, which is more visible in the 3/4 view. Being able to find the edges in drawings and understanding form that way is going to help you choose your lines better. And again, it becomes kind of a stylistic choice where you want to place your lines when you have something like this. How do I want to place my lines? If I'm going to be doing more like a realistic line drawing, I might do a lot of lines in this area just to show the form of the nose. And so, I'm kind of doing the same thing as if I were doing shading, but because I'm using a pen, I have to do it more like this. That is, it's the same thing as if I was shading all this with pencil in different tones, but I'm using lines instead. And then the result will be something that ends up looking like a face. That's one way to do it. The other way, if you're just doing like more contour lines, it's choosing what lines you want to see in contour. And same thing with eyebrows. Eyebrows have a lot of edges that are lost, and so you have to decide where are you going to do that to show the likeness of the figure. You might get these. You might use thinner lines way out here, right? All these lines might be a lot thinner, and then you can use thicker lines here. Again, I'm probably going to use a lot of thick lines here to really show the form. I know I'm doing that to really stop you, but I'm just giving an idea. Thick lines here because a lot of shadow coming down here. Oops. Might show like a couple of lines like this. Some cross hatching to really show the shadows there. There's an edge there, the edge of the body where it rolls over. This is the edge because it's rolling over away from us. One tip, when you're tracing, trace inside the image. Don't trace outside the image. Right? Trace inside the face. Otherwise you'll make the face look fatter than it is. Lips are pretty, there are a couple different things you can do. Like you can kind of have this line here coming across. Make the edges dark here. Come up and then just kind of disappear. Maybe only have there. And kind of where the light hits it, have it break. That's a stylistic choice you make when you're starting to draw lips. And then you can just have maybe this middle part here really figured out, and that would be how the lips would look. That's one way to go about it. All different kinds of ways to go about this. I might even just do smaller little lines here. Might only hint at the edges of the nose. Again, you do want to keep the likeness though. If you're working on a photo and you want to keep the likeness, you have to make sure you capture a lot of that. And the eyes is really important. You capture a lot of detail in the eyes. Nose isn't as important. And interesting enough, you can like take someone's face and Photoshop if you're good at it, and like put an entire different nose on them, but it looks sort of like their nose, and those still look like the person. When you're drawing the person, you can draw the nose a lot differently than their nose actually looks. Give them a much thinner nose, and it still looks like them. You notice when someone gets a nose job, nothing really changes. They still look like them. It's like, yeah, they look a little different, but they still pretty much look like them. And so, I might just choose to do those lines like that. And how I choose to do those lines is understanding the form. And I'm deciding what forms I want to pick up and how much of it I want to pick up when I'm dropping the lines down. So like I said, even tracing is indeed an art form in of itself. Knowing where on that photograph you're going to choose to turn something into a cartoon rather is an art form. To know where you want to, if you're just tracing the photo and turning it into a cartoon, it definitely takes knowledge of form to know where to place your lines at to make it look good, to make it look cool, to make it look stylistic. Otherwise, you're going to just get something that looks kind of boring. It might not even look much like the person. It's actually really, really hard, believe it or not, especially with some photos and some people, to get pure line work, a pure line type of cartoon drawing to look like the person. The main things you want to get in there is the eye detail. Get all that detail in there and make it look, it's a cartoon, but still make it look realistic. And then make sure you get some of these shadows in. If all you're doing is using line and no shade at all, like no color shading, get some of those tones in there with line work. because if it misses a lot of that detail, then the face won't look as much like the person. But if you gather that, it's going to look a lot more like the person. All right, hopefully this helps you guys. I know it's kind of a long video, but there's a lot of information in this video. It's not like I'm just repeating myself over and over again. At least I hope I'm not. I'm trying to. Sometimes I might explain things more than once, only to try to explain it in a different way to hopefully make it stick, because not everyone learns everything the exact same way. So if I kind of approach it a couple different ways, maybe more people will learn from it. Right. Thank you for watching. Hey, if you have any suggestions and you have any recommendations, things that you want to learn, please let me know. What is it that you want to know? What do you want to learn next? In the comments below, just type it. Don't be shy. You can type it anonymously. It's not like we need to know who you are. You can make another YouTube account if you want, if you really don't want people to know that you're requesting something, and just say, hey, I would really like to see a tutorial on this subject, or whatever it is you want to see. It can be Photoshop manipulation. It can be photo editing. It can be drawing. It can be digital painting. Whatever it is that you want to see that I'm able to do. Also, if you like my tutorials, and especially if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. But more importantly, click that share button and share it with your community. Share it with like your Facebook or your Twitter or whatever. YouTube makes it really easy for you to do that. All you do is click the share button, and then bam, you click a couple icons of your social networks, and then your other friends might benefit from them. You might be surprised how many of your friends might actually like the video, even if they're not artists themselves. They might still enjoy watching it, and they might go, "Oh, hey, I might want to give it a try at art." And there might be a lot of your Facebook or YouTube friends that or on Facebook or Twitter friends, whatever, that you don't know want to draw, but never thought they could, and then they watch one of these videos and it blows them away maybe, and they're like, hey, I think I'm gonna give it my hand drawing. Next thing you know, they're drawing. So yeah, please do that for me, and do that for all my videos you like. Go back to previous videos that you've watched in the past and go, hey, I remember I really liked this video. I found it very helpful. I'm going to go click that share button. I'm going to click my Facebook icon, and click the Twitter icon, or whatever social networks you belong to, and share it with all your buddies, and maybe they'll enjoy it just as much as you did. All right, thanks for watching.